Hi, everybody. Welcome to this new podcast called Real Talk with Rick. My name is Rick Getcho, and I'm the city manager for the city of Eden Prairie. In this podcast, I will be interviewing guests that are associated and involved with the city of Eden Prairie. So on this first podcast, it seemed very fitting that the first guest would be the mayor of Eden Prairie, Nancy Tyra-Lukens. With the exception of a 4-year period from 2007 to 2010, Nancy has been the mayor or city council member since 1994 in Eden Prairie. We were able to talk about her background, some of her proudest moments, her legacy, and some advice that she has for those that will follow her. So here is my talk with Mayor Nancy Tyra-Lukens. Well, welcome, Mayor Nancy.
Hi.
Hi, how you doing? Good. So I mentioned to you, I think I asked you, have you ever listened to podcasts before? I think it was one of the first questions I asked, and you said that you had.
Right.
And then I told you that the city was thinking about doing some podcasting and that we would do an interview format and bring people in and interview them who have a very close affiliation with the city of Eden Prairie.
I was very skeptical, wondering what your ulterior motive was for this.
Right.
But there isn't one.
There isn't one. It is just that. It's a conversation with people in Eden Prairie and about Eden Prairie, and I could not think of a better guest to begin with than you, the mayor of Eden Prairie.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks.
Happy you're here.
Happy to do it.
So let's bring everybody up to speed from the day you were born until today. So starting with maybe talk a little bit about your upbringing, maybe where you grew up, where you went to school, and maybe ultimately how you ended up in the fine city of Eden Prairie.
Okay. Wow. A lot of territory to cover. As you know, I'm on Medicare now, so there's a lot of territory. Grew up in Golden Valley, one of 3 girls, the middle one of 3 girls. My father was from New Prague, Minnesota. So I have a lot of memories of going from Golden Valley to New Prague via Eden Prairie. I can remember the Flying Red Horse at the mobile station. I remember the farmers markets and the old Eden Prairie drive-in movie theater. A lot of those memories really stand out, as well as like the Northrop King test site, which is right across the lake from where I currently live. Went to Robbinsdale High School. Little story I wanted to tell about my youth, though.
Yes.
I had kind of forgotten about this until about 20 years ago when I got involved in local politics, and that was the fact that when I was about 9 years old, Barry Goldwater came to town campaigning he was running for president, and I was asked, I don't know why, but I was asked to be the campfire girl that, along with a Boy Scout and a Brownie, led the Pledge of Allegiance at his rally in downtown Minneapolis. And I was...
What year would this have been?
Well, boy, probably about 1961, maybe 62. Does that sound right?
That sounds right. I think somewhere 60 to 64, somewhere in
But
there.
about 20 years ago, I found a program from that event. And I opened up the program, and there was my name and all the different speakers for the event. And the choir that sang the national anthem was an Eden Prairie church choir that was, Eden Prairie at that time was really small community. So what are the odds that I would be there, Eden Prairie's choir, and here I am years later living in Eden Prairie.
There's destiny involved. It was, as you know, as you talk about, it was a city, even I think when you moved here, of one stoplight.
Yeah. It was actually a village at the time that when I was a kid. It was a village. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there was one stoplight.
So Robbinsdale High School.
Okay, Robbinsdale High School.
Right.
Northwestern University for college.
Evanston, Illinois.
In Evanston, Illinois, where I met my husband. And then I came to the University of Minnesota and started dental school. I was going to follow in my father's footsteps, but discovered that was really not my cup of tea. So I quit dental school and went to Michigan, University of Michigan, and got a degree in nutritional biochemistry. Got married, and then we were in Rochester for a number of years and moved to Nashville, Tennessee when my husband finished his residency. and then came back, had an opportunity to come back to Minneapolis, and we did.
Okay.
And that's where I had my third child. I had 2 little boys at that point, and I started the MBA program at Carlson and got pregnant with my third, Claire, about the time I graduated. So did a lot of volunteer work after that rather than working with 3 little kids.
3 little kids.
Yeah.
Was that 2 master's degrees?
Yes, my husband jokes that he can't move again because every place we move, I have to go to college and get a degree.
Get another degree. Well, you may have the opportunity.
And another baby, but I think the chances of that are very low right now.
Are lower.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then that brings us to Eden Prairie and living in Eden Prairie. So maybe talk a little bit about involvement in the city, eventually leading to being on the city council. You and I talk a lot about civic engagement and how people can become active and become part of commissions, committees, groups, and eventually city council members. What was your story to get onto city council?
Well, when we moved back to Minneapolis, we picked Eden Prairie as a place to live basically because of its proximity to my husband's job. But I still remembered Eden Prairie as it was years ago when I said, Flying Red Horse and the Northrop King farms. But we settled into Eden Prairie, loved the city. As I mentioned, I went back to school to get this MBA and then had my third child and decided, I wanted to do a lot of volunteer work within my community. I had been doing lots of volunteer work in the Twin City area, downtown, and I just decided it was time to do it more locally because it's hard to get daycare.
Sure.
There used to be drop-in daycare centers in Eden Prairie, actually, where you could just go in and drop your kid for 3 hours and go to meetings or do whatever, but those disappeared. So I thought, well, I have to do something a little closer to home. So I got involved in the Community Needs and Resources Council, which was a group that was overseen by the city, but it involved a lot of the nonprofit caregivers and health-related folk within the city to kind of look at what needs does our community have and what are the resources that we have to address those human service needs. So by doing that, I got to know a few people here at City Hall, and I got to know the mayor at that point. It was Doug Tempest, and he started encouraging me to run for city council, which is not something I'd ever considered, never had a thought of doing anything like that. But every time I would see him, he'd bring it up. And he'd run into my husband, he'd bring it up. Finally, after about 3 years of this, I relented and decided I was going to do it. And so ran in the first election. It would have been 1994, fall of 94 I ran.
Sure. And it's interesting that who would have thought that many people that get involved in local office, it isn't a plan.
No.
It isn't something that they're thinking about doing. It's encouragement.
Right.
Whether it's, in this case, it was, the mayor at that time.
Right.
In the early 90s. And then was it a big race?
It was a huge
big
race.
Ticket?
It was a huge race. Yeah. There were 11 candidates for 2 city council spots. So it was huge. Yeah. And I don't think really any of them that ran, if I can remember well, I don't think any of them were really single interest folk. I think they all were people that just had a real positive attitude towards the city and really just wanted to jump in and help things.
Sure.
But that was the election that Ron Case and I both won, our first elections. And we had a city council member that passed away in office. And so they needed to get somebody on board right away. So after the election, I had finished first. So I was sworn in. So I have about a month and a half of seniority on Mr. Case.
Do you let him know that on
Occasionally
a regular basis?
I do,
Okay.
yeah. If he gets out of line, I let him know that I'm the senior council member.
Understood. So you served on the council for, I think it was about 7 years, right? Mm-hmm. And then becoming mayor was actually part of kind of a bittersweet scenario.
Yes. Yeah. The woman who was mayor at that point, Dr. Jean Harris, contracted lung cancer. Not a smoker, but she had lung cancer and passed away fairly quickly. She had a little over 1 year left on her term. So come January, I think she died in December. So come January, one of the first things that we had to do at that meeting was decide what we were going to do about her position. And our city attorney said that we had the option of running a special election there would have been an election coming up that fall anyway.
Okay.
But we could have run a special election. It would have taken till like March or April to get everything taken care of and underway. That seemed kind of silly. So the council decided that they would take advantage of the other option, which was to appoint somebody as mayor. And I was appointed mayor. So then we had to fill another spot, and we appointed somebody from the community to fill the city council spot that I vacated.
And as I think I mentioned earlier, if I want to get the year right, that was 2001?
Right.
Right. And then you filled that term then.
And then, even though my attitude going into it was, being mayor was not a goal. We'll see how it goes, and if I like it, maybe I'll run in the fall.
Okay.
But it was a really kind of unique period of time because a lot of the leadership in the community was changing. I was a new mayor. We had a new city manager. We had a new police chief. We had a new school superintendent. The head of the Chamber of Commerce had just turned over. So there were a lot of people that were all new to their jobs, lots of enthusiasm, lots of willingness to work together as a group. And it was a really great year. So I did decide to run again that fall.
Yeah, and looking back, we're all grateful. And
Oh,
thinking of that
thanks.
time period as well, that talking about Eden Prairie and those earlier days, the 90s through the 2000s, that was that fast-growing, fast-moving time for you as a council member in the 90s and now as mayor through the 2000s. So you had, like you mentioned, there are a lot of new people, but I think you've talked about, meetings that could go 2-3 hours because there'd be 20 or 30 items for development of this community happening at that time.
Yeah, we even had meetings that lasted a lot longer than that. Our
Sure.
council meetings generally started at 7, and we had a policy that if the meeting lasted till 11 o'clock, you had to take a vote to continue going with the meeting because we had so many development projects. And anytime you're putting a new development in next to a current development, of course, all the people that are already living in that area have an opinion and want to come to the the public hearings and make their voice heard. So these meetings would go on and on. I think the latest one we had was a 1 o'clock
1 a.m.
meeting.
Yeah, I've been here 7 years, and I think I remember one meeting since I've been here that went to that midnight hour.
Yeah.
And there's still, now we're in this phase of, and we'll get to this, but we're in this phase of redevelopment now where it's reconstructing, taking down and reconstructing a lot of redevelopment. And that's tricky and complicated and does involve people that live nearby. But in the time that you're talking about, you're right. It's new thing next to new thing next to new thing next to new items. So then you ran for another term as mayor?
Well, after that 1-year appointment, I ran that fall
For the
for
4
another
years.
for a 4-year term. So I did 5 years, and I thought, well, that's more than I ever planned to do. So I think I will retire. So I retired and enjoyed my 4 years off. My daughter at that point was going through the last few years of high school, so it was a really nice time to have a little extra time to spend with her. But then I came back. I had some pressure from residents to come back 4 years later. So in 2010, I ran again. So I've been through now 5 campaigns, 5 election
5 campaigns, and with a 4-year hiatus for that period of time from 2007 to 2010, being an elected official for the city of Eden Prairie from 1994 to 2000 through 2018.
Right.
And you have chosen to retire again, not to run again.
Right. Yeah, 5 campaigns, and it never really gets any more comfortable to see your name on a sign on the street. It's kind of feels like a big invasion of privacy, but it's a necessary evil.
Yeah, I've heard many people say that they do want to serve and they would be a part of being in office. It's sometimes the campaigning, the signs, those issues. Yeah. So now looking back over that time frame, is what you're doing, and it can be maybe the time as mayor, because that goes back more than 10 years ago, or even council. Are things different? How with maybe some other areas where Eden Prairie's changed? We talked about the physical landscape of Eden Prairie, but maybe talk a little bit about what's changed in this time that you've been here, elected official.
In the early years when I was on council, the common thing that you heard was that the average length of time that most residents lived in Eden Prairie was only like 3 years. It was a very transient community. A lot of people that get transferred for their jobs would settle in Eden Prairie because they had young families, and it's such a great family community. And then 3 years later, they'd be transferred out, and somebody new would come in. I think that's settled down quite a bit. That I certainly don't see that from the people that I talk to as mayor, that is really an issue anymore. So I think we're a more stable community. We're still very much a family community. The physical environment, as you said, has changed. The businesses that are here, we've got a lot more businesses, a lot more restaurants. The mall redevelopment, that has been huge. A wonderful asset for our community. But the community itself has changed too. It's aged. It's not as young as it once was. It's also very much more diverse than it was when I first moved here. And that's a trend that you see not only in Eden Prairie, but in areas all over the Twin Cities, in areas all over the country, literally. It's a big change.
Yeah, absolutely. A growing, becoming a mature city, a mature suburb, and I think in getting many accolades for what the city does as well in terms of service delivery. But you're right, developing and aging and much more diverse. So that's what you hear quite a bit. Could you, maybe if you could, there's probably many things that you feel proud of, many things that have been under your watch, but can you think of maybe one or two achievements or accomplishments that you're most proud of?
Yeah, definitely. Just by virtue of the fact that I'm in this job, I feel like that I have a hand in lots of changes that have happened in Eden Prairie. I can drive by a restaurant or a neighborhood and know that I voted on that, and I'm part of the reason that it's there, and it's a great feeling. But a lot of that just happens because I happen to be in office. I really didn't change that.
You don't tell your kids and your friends that business is there
because of me? No, I don't say that.
Okay, all right.
But then there are some things where it really takes a lot of leadership and a lot of commitment from city council members to get accomplished. And one of those things that I would bring up is the new community center that we have in Eden Prairie. When I moved here in 1985, the community center that we had was already inadequate. It was never built to the specifications or to the size and finish that it should have been originally, but I guess the city just felt like they needed to get something going, get some hockey rinks, get a pool. But it really wasn't adequate for the population even when I moved here. So it was one of those things that was kind of pushed aside because the city was so busy growing and adding new people, and there were so many other things that staff and council had to do. It kind of got pushed by the wayside. Sometimes economically, the time just wasn't right to have a vote on whether or not we were going to do bonding for the community center or raise taxes. So it kind of got pushed off for a number of years. And finally, we got it accomplished. It's a beautiful community center. It's busy all the time. The residents just love it. It really meets a need that the community had. And I think it's something we can really be proud of. And I think as the years go by, it still looks great. It's how old now? Is it about 8 years old now?
There's been a couple different additions.
Yeah.
But, so you've got that original one that you're talking about is 10 years now. I think 2008, 2009.
And now we've added the pools.
And then the pool, right.
And so it's really spectacular now.
I think you're right, though. I think the big addition, the big piece was the 2008, 2009, and then now recently with the pool. Another thing that I think that our council was very active with was the issue of the 212 being extended and built through Eden Prairie. And that was really contentious because it had been on the planning boards for, 35, 40 years at that point. This was in the mid-90s. And there was definitely a need for it. But what the legislature said was, we'll do this. They'd already owned a lot of the land. We'll do this, but we'll do it if it's going to be a toll road. And so we had hordes of people turning up for council meetings, really three groups of residents. The residents that didn't want the road at all,
period. The people that wanted 212 to go through, even if it was a toll road, and the people that wanted it to go through as long as it wasn't a toll road. So it was a classic example of you're not going to make everybody happy. In fact, you're going to make 2/3 of the group not happy. But we kind of held really firm to our guns. And when the cities along the corridor, us, Chanhassen, Chaska, and all, had to vote at their council as to whether or not they would allow this to be a toll road, because that was part of the requirement by the legislature, we denied it because we felt that there was obviously a need. We're a tax-rich area for the state. Why would you put in a toll road and then make us, who are paying high taxes anyway, pay every time we use it? It just did not seem fair. So we held firm on that, and the road went in, and it didn't divide our community into north and south like some people feared it would. I think it's come into the community and, if nothing else, helped and made the north-south less divisive because you don't have piles of cars trafficking down Highway 5, congesting traffic and making it so difficult for people to get around that they just kind of stuck to their part of town. So I think it's really helped.
I mean, transportation, I think there's 4 or 5 boxes probably not far from my office that say 212 toll road that are way before my time. It was a big issue.
It was a big issue.
It was. And I remember, I wasn't working here at the time, but I remember the whole toll road discussion, because you're right, now we have, obviously, the min-pass lanes, but there wasn't anything like that before. So that was a big deal. But transportation, I mean, that's an interesting topic because you've spent a lot of time on transportation, very active with Southwest Transit, Southwest Light Rail Transit, a lot of other highway work all the way up through 494, 169. So that's been I would think that's a big piece of what you've been involved in, too, is transportation.
Definitely. And that's certainly led by the fact that we know our citizens were concerned about transportation issues. We do a city survey every year, and transportation, year after year, comes up as the biggest issue. So we knew it was something that we had to address. And when we're sitting through council meetings till 1 a.m., looking at development after development, we knew things weren't going to get any easier. We needed to address the transportation issue.
Right. No, you're right. To this day, it's still about congestion. What's interesting is that congestion is what's happening on the crosstown, 494, 169, and not as much when we read about congestion not getting from the town center mall area to the Lions Tap. We hear a little bit about traffic signals, traffic signal timing, and I think the flashing yellow light is considered the greatest invention of the last 10 years.
Yeah, it is wonderful.
But, transportation. Wonderful. You want to touch on that because I know you also
roundabouts.
Yep. But I know you spent a lot of time being a leader in the bus transit as well.
Many years.
It's a big part of what you did. Even when you weren't in the council, I believe you were still on Southwest Transit.
On Southwest Transit.
So that's good. Are there any? What are some big surprises? Is there anything that's really surprised you?
About being mayor?
Yeah, in the time you've been mayor, elected official.
I don't think I was really surprised about anything about being mayor because I'd been on the council for 7 years before I became mayor. So I had a pretty good idea of what the job involved. I didn't know that I would be signing my name so many times. The stacks of papers that I have after every council meeting are amazing. And my penmanship, when it comes to writing my name, has just gotten worse and worse and worse over all these years.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff, a lot of documents to sign.
Yeah, and a lot of emails, too. The period of time that I've been involved in the council, things changed from handwritten letters or people typing up letters on their typewriter or computer and sending them to us to almost all emails. It's very rare that I get an actual letter anymore. So there are a lot of emails. There are a lot of people trying to sell things to cities that send emails to the mayor and city council members, so there's a lot of stuff to weed through. And it does surprise me how much email I get.
There is a lot of email. I think there's somewhat of a misnomer that the mayor is, in many cities, the full-time employee here at City Hall, 50, 60 hours a week. But I think with the meetings that you do have and the emails you respond to, you probably end up putting that amount of time in sometimes. But the there is a lot, and that's a positive thing I think about the city, that people do not hesitate to email their city council, to call when needed, and if it is something that someone needs to look at a pothole or some issue, it gets routed to the right person, and you guys feel that's your duty to do that. But there's a lot. Communication has changed over the years, but
it's a lot easier to shoot off an email to somebody than it is to write a letter and type it up, put it in an envelope, put a stamp on it, and put it in the mail. So I think that email has made government more participative.
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of more about your time in office is, and we can keep looking back, but I want to also think about legacy a little bit. And what do you think? Because when you kind of look back on being mayor and council member, how would you want people to remember you and your time by? What would your legacy be?
I'm not sure that I'm answering exactly what you're trying to find, but I would hope that people remember me as somebody who's willing to look at the long term, and that I don't settle for what's going to look good for us in the short term. I'm always thinking long term. I hope people remember me for being willing to address issues that are sometimes controversial, because we're asked to by our citizens. And I feel very strongly that if we get a lot of citizens saying we need to look at something, we should look at something. So I hope that people recognize that was an important part of what I did. Also, I hope people remember me as for being willing to do more than just the basics that are required of the job. And I think I'm in the nice position of not having any other full-time employment. So I do have a lot of hours that I can give the job and do give the job. And that is kind of one of the surprising things that I found, is how this job can expand to fill all your available time if you have it, because people do want mayors involved in regional planning issues or on this committee or that committee, or they want you to come and do a Cub Scout thing or something at a church. There are so many opportunities. You have to kind of learn to say no, unfortunately, because there is
so much time. But and that's something to touch on, is, you are involved regionally. You have good relationships with other area mayors as well, involved in other causes, issues. So as you move out of being mayor, what do you think you're going to still be involved in some of those?
Well, hopefully. Right? I mean, one of the things that's been really important to me for over 10 years now is the whole issue of sustainability and environment, and I hope to stay involved in something like that as a volunteer. I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like at this point, but I would really like to do that because that's something near and dear to my heart, and it's kind of the ultimate of long-term planning. Any changes we can make now are good for the long term. So
there are no right answers. I'm not looking for a specific answer.
Okay.
Your answers are your own answers, but I would have said, when you're thinking about accomplishments and legacy, you have been known as being very progressive when it comes to sustainability and pushing that. Is back, was it 13 or 14 years ago with the city's initiative on what was 2040-15 at that time, and wanting, kind of pushing the staff to be more energy efficient in our buildings and in our fleet. And that, began in 2005 when we reached those goals in 2015. And now sustainability encompasses more than just city operations and energy savings.
Right.
It's water and waste and pollinators and energy, and that's something you and the council kind of keep pushing on. So I'm not surprised to hear that you want to stay involved in that.
It's really important, and it's important so important to the next generations. So we need to do something. We can't be complacent.
So what are you going to miss? What are you going to miss about?
Well, I'm definitely going to miss the other council members. We've worked together a long time. It's amazing when you add up the total number of years that this current group of 5 council members have been on the job. It's over 100 years, I think. So we know each other pretty well, and we've become friends, and I will miss them. I'll also miss the staff. We have an amazing city staff, a lot of people that are doing things for the right reasons and are really dedicated to their jobs. And I think you see that reflected in a lot of the awards that the city gets. It's the staff that's doing it, that are doing good things with sustainability or with the arts center or with our parks. It's just great dedication of our staff.
Well, we appreciate that, and as staff, we would say that the tone starts at the top, and it starts with an elected body setting the tone and setting that culture. So that's a big deal.
The other thing I will miss, though, is the learning curve. I have learned about so many things that I never even thought about in my life. Things like how sewers run in a city, things like small lake management, where are parks located in your city, and does everybody have access to the parks? How walkable is your city? When I drive around now to other parts of the country or other cities, I look at things like that. I just look at things in a different light than I ever thought I would. So as a person who really likes to learn all their life, it's been a fascinating job.
There is a lot to a city, no doubt about it. I think when I asked you about what podcasts you listen to, a lot of them were based on in those areas, right? And I know you're an avid reader as well, so you're going to continue to be a lifelong learner,
right?
Obviously, but the what will you not miss?
I won't miss getting through all those emails and signing my name a million times. I won't miss NIMBYism, although it doesn't seem like we've seen that as much lately as we used to. And I think that was because of all the development that was going on before and the changes that people were seeing. Those are things that I won't really miss.
So NIMBYism, not in my backyard.
Yes, not in my backyard.
In my backyard. And I think you said this earlier, that being an elected official, especially in Eden Prairie, 36 square miles, 65,000 people, a mayor and 4 other council members, so it's 5 elected officials, all at large.
All at large.
All at large, you guys do. No one is assigned to a ward. Mm-hmm. So every email you get, every vote you take, every issue that comes up, you're voting for
everybody.
Everybody, the city as a whole. So you're right. There are times where X building, X trail, X road, X project might upset somebody, right?
Right.
And you're not going to miss some of those debates.
No, but it's amazing how often people that were upset about something like that happening come back after the development has occurred, and they're perfectly fine with it. It's just human nature to not really be real comfortable with change. But I don't think I've ever had anybody come back say, this is just as horrible as I told you it was going to be, and I wish you'd never done it. That's never happened.
Well, it might be not knowing exactly what's going to happen. I mean, I think we always say that one of the most important assets that someone can have near and dear to their heart is their home and their property.
Right.
So that's what they're passionate about. But I think this is something about you and the city council as well, in the same group, having been together, that you listen, you take in all types of input. I think sometimes there might be someone who may not be happy and they might disagree with the decision made. It hasn't been too controversial, but no one's going to say that the council didn't give them a chance to be heard. But I guess you don't say you're not going to. You had meetings that went till 1 o'clock in the morning, but you haven't had as many of those. But there are a lot of other meetings that you may not have to worry about. But what would your advice be, maybe, to the next mayor, or the next, maybe mayor of any city, not just Eden Prairie, but someone who's going to be thinking about stepping into doing what you've been doing for so long?
Well, I think I would, and I brought this up before, encourage people to think in the long term rather than the short term, and that the next mayor should recognize their kind of unique ability to advocate on issues and their ability to apply locally solutions to more global issues, because it's really true. So much happens at the grassroots level, and that's where we're at. And that's the wonderful thing about being involved in city government. It's not Republican or Democrat. We're just doing what we can to make the city a better place for everybody to live. And if you keep that in mind and make your decisions based on the community as a whole, I think the mayor will do a great job.
Good advice. And then maybe wrapping up,
mm-hmm.
We are one of the best cities to live in the country, and more so than cities surrounding us, especially Edina. So what can you name maybe 1 or 2 ways in which we're much better than Edina?
Oh, well, we're much more beautiful city.
Right.
More rolling hills, more green, more parks, more lakes, more streams. I think that there was a survey done about 15 years ago. It was in the Star and Tribune, and it looked at per capita how much open space it is in various cities around the Twin Cities. And we were by far, we had the most open space of any city. So I think that's one of the things that makes us better than Edina. Plus, obviously, our staff and our councils are much better.
Well,
and
yeah,
our schools,
right,
everything.
Right. No, if we had 2 hours, that half the podcast
Yes, right.
could be about that. Well, thank you very much.
All right.
Mayor. Much appreciated. That was awesome.